Thank you, and good evening, everybody. I run an office in Coronel del Mar in Paris, like Professor Wolf said, and thank you also for the invitation, also Professor Teubner. And the office name is VIEWDESIGN, because it's what we're trying to do. We're trying to provide views to our clients, insights and outlooks. We're working in graphic design, branding, we even do naming, and we also do package design. It's just a little introduction that you get a bit of what I'm doing. Interface design, user experience on, in this case, toys. It's a remote control or laboratory devices, medical devices. And product design. When I say we, it's because I have a partner in Switzerland who runs his office independently but under the same name in Basel. I'm not specialized in coffee machines, but I've done a lot of coffee machines, but also luxury grooming equipment for men and more coffee machines. This is the most recent one, actually. Let me go back to that. That's on the market right now, Williams-Sonoma, Sulataro. I don't advertise because I'm not getting royalties, so just to mention. And that's another remote control. I'm also a writer. I've written a book about iconic design called Iconics, and I'm working on the second edition now, which for some bizarre reason has a completely different title and a completely different cover. It's mainly because the distributor of my editor has changed. It had nothing to do with me or the book, but that's how the publishing world apparently works. So it's going to be called the Design Hall of Fame. And I'm going to add some icons in there, so it's going to be 135 different icons. Gives you a good overview over the design history and what I consider exceptional and remarkable products from hundreds of years ago until today. The oldest one is from 1600 something. The book looks like this. There's a little text that gives you information about the background, then the company that produces it, if known, the year when it was launched, or conceived. That's not always the same, and the name of the designer and what nationality he has, or she. Those are some of the objects in the book. Afterwards, when I'm finished with my lecture and we go to questions and answer, I'll have a copy here I can give you around. I have a website, other than my professional VIEWDESIGN website, where I promote the book, and there's also a blog with posts of items that are not in the book, that didn't kind of make it to these 135 most famous ones, but they're still interesting to look at. But tonight I'm here to talk to you about the concept of beauty, and I'd really appreciated very much that I was given the opportunity to choose that topic myself, because, you know, I'm a designer, so I can talk about my previous experiences, I can talk about how to innovate and all these things, but I've never spoken about something that is lofty and philosophical as beauty. The problem that I want to discuss first is, why did I pick that topic? And why do we talk, or why should we talk about beauty? And number one, you don't get paid for it, so why should we mention it? I mean, no client says, well, Mr. Joensson, we want this vacuum cleaner or whatever, it takes you so and so long, and then we give you $10,000 more to make it beautiful. The reason is because my clients can't tell. People can't say what is beautiful or not. They cannot measure that. There are no standards for beauty. There are standards amongst specific target groups, perhaps, amongst countries, cultures, religions, but there are no generally approved standards written down somewhere about beauty. And the reason is because it's impossible to measure it. There is just no scientific approach possible to beauty, I believe. It's because it's a subjective judgment. Does that bother us? Should that bother us? Because all these reasons that I mentioned before why we should or should not or do not discuss beauty, they don't mean that beauty doesn't exist. Like anything that is really important in our lives, like peace or love or our reasons for being on this earth, on this planet, it's subjective but still crucial. It's absolutely important. I mean, you can't say, how much peace do we have? We measured in those units. It's not scientific. And with love, it's the same. Love exists. I hope you agree. I hope you're in a position to agree. But it's not scientifically approachable. It is at the heart of our culture and our civilization. Now, culture, I want to talk a little bit about culture. Culture actually has, the word has its roots in agriculture. It's anything that has an artistic or civilized value. And civilization is another word that basically denotes the level of human development, of human culture at its most developed stage, as our most current stage. At least we hope to believe that we are in the most civilized of all worlds right now. Beauty exists. And why we should talk about it is because nobody other than us is really qualified to design beautiful products. And that's something that when you start to study design, maybe you have thought about it, maybe you haven't. But I want to encourage you to do that. No engineer is going to take that job. No marketing person. They're smart people in marketing. They're wonderful engineers. But they can't do what we have to do. And if tonight you walk out and you kind of quietly nod to yourself that, yes, you should do that, then I've made my point. And I hope for that. Now, this is just why I talk about beauty. And now I'm going to talk about beauty. And I'll be open. It was not easy for me to prepare that lecture because it is a difficult subject to tackle. And I thought when I started to think about that, since it's not something that can be measured, I shouldn't apply a scientific approach, but I should come from a poetic path. And so I've picked 4 quotes that explain characteristics of beauty. The first one is Ettore Sottsa's, an Italian designer who unfortunately passed away a while ago. And he said, if anything will save us, beauty will. And what that does, it explains the importance of beauty. Then there's Confucius, who said, everything has beauty, but not everybody sees it. And that shows how ubiquitous beauty is. It's actually everywhere, but not everybody can see it. I really like that quote. Then you have heard this old adage of beauty is in the eye of the beholder. That's actually from Roman times, and you know, I didn't pick any Roman. This is Athena, a Greek goddess, and because I couldn't find the origin, the one person that had the idea to say that. And what that speaks of is the subjectiveness of beauty. And also, we should distance ourselves from the notion that being subjective is something negative. We're all subjective. We're all subjects. We're not objects. We can't be objective. We're subjects, and it's fine to be subjective in our judgment. The most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or touched. They are felt with the heart, said Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, a writer known for his book Le Petit Prince, The Little Prince, that he also illustrated. And it speaks about the emotional quality. And if we sum that up, those are the things that are significant about beauty. It's important, it's ubiquitous, it's subjective, and it's emotional. Now, if I go and look at a dictionary and I approach the question of beauty through a linguistic path, I find that it says it's shape, color, or form that pleases the aesthetic senses. There is sometimes a wrong notion of what aesthetic means. Aesthetic doesn't mean anything else but affecting perception. It means anything that you feel, that's aesthetic. It doesn't mean that, oh, that's when the colors are not so strong or when it's kind of nice. It's nothing to do with that. The moment it affects your perception, it's aesthetic. So, in layman's term, beauty is something that pleases perception. Our problem is that not everybody's perception is the same. They're actually very different. And our problem as designers is that sometimes we think, well, you know, so I start from my point of view. Unfortunately, our perception is not important. Why is it not important? Because the group of designers forms a very small part of the American population. In this case, we're 0.01%. And I've heard that because I just had dinner with your two professors, that one of them, he didn't complain, but he mentioned, oh, there's a student, and he says, oh, I can't continue, I wait first, I want to hear whether you like what I do or not. Well, let me tell you, the percentage of industrial design professors is a lot smaller than 0.01%, so you don't need to listen to them at all, if it's about beauty. You want to listen to the majority. And although our opinion is not important, we are the ones that create the dots that other people connect. So we are at the origin of what people perceive. From that point of view, it's not unimportant what we think and what we feel and what we believe. So how do we please other people's perception? We stimulate their visual sense. That's at the origin of what we do as designer. We stimulate the visual sense. And here I picked an image. You see that funny colored insulating foam / glue that keeps these boards together. It's deliberately in this color so it's visible. That affects our perception. I'm not passing judgment. I'm trying to not tell you tonight too much of what I think is beautiful or not, because that's not the point. The point is that you start to think on your own, what is beauty? Any design consists of two parts, any design activity. There is a creative part, and everybody knows that when you study design, you say, well, I hope I'm creative enough. But what you should similarly worry about is the selective part, and I'll come to that later. But we start with the creative part. For the creative part of creating beauty, I suggest you do what every designer does with every project. You conduct research. And research, it took me a while to understand what design research is or what it can be. And I always thought research, it sounds really scientific. It sounds like a white lab coat and a laboratory and you go about. But design research has an artistic component that scientists don't do or don't do often. I mean, I don't know whether medical doctors have an artistic approach in what they do. They might. But for us, it's an important part of our research activity. When we research, we find out about the conditions. That means the environment. That can be the continent where the product is used, the country, the city, the social group. It can be the environment, the house. It can be which place in the house. Is it above the table or under the table? All these things play a role. And of course, we research about the humans using our product. Who are they? How tall are they? What do they think? What do they feel? And the answer to these questions will bring us closer to a position from where we can decide what is visually acceptable or desirable for them. Then, and you know that too from your studies, you create variety. It means you could create a lot of variety. You come up with different ideas. Why do you do that? Believe me, it's very economic if you get an assignment and you come up with one idea, you sketch that, and you're done. It's the fastest way to a solution. The problem is, you don't know whether that's the best solution. Now, you will never know whether what you do is the best. If you compete with other designers, because your client asked 3 designers to work, or you're in a design competition, you always worry what the other people do. And you shouldn't worry about that too much. You should worry about how well can you do. And you can find that out only when you create a variety of solutions. You want to make sure that what you propose is the best of what you can come up with. You worry later whether it's better than other people's. But first, you want to make sure that you don't do one version, you present that, and, well, that's what I can do. No, you can do more, perhaps. Perhaps in the end, your first version was the best. I always wonder whether I should be frustrated when that happens. You make 5 versions, and then the first was the best. You say, I could have spent that time with my girlfriend and doing funny things like whale watching on a boat or whatever, and here I'm spending time on 4 versions or 3 versions that I didn't use. But that's the wrong idea. You need that to be convinced to be sure that you have come up with the best. Now the next, I want to encourage you to develop extremes. I think design, like any art, needs courage. You need to go beyond boundaries. And often we're happy if we find one solution that works. And it's good to start like that. Do something simple that you feel comfortable with, and then put it aside and create something that goes way beyond. I once read about a design office that said, we used to show 3 versions to our clients, one according to the briefing, one a little bit beyond the briefing, and one really wacko. And then we started to drop the first one. Because when a client writes a briefing, they always formulate what they can imagine. But that's not what they pay you for. They pay you for what they cannot imagine. So it's good to go beyond that. And of course I've had clients, you go beyond and then they say, well, actually, my current customers, they don't want any changes. Well, as long as they pay me, then they see what they could have done. And if they think their customers' opinion is the best marketing strategy, you can't help them. The next is worry about the details. Why? I think there are a lot of designers around, and there are more every day thanks to the efforts of the schools. And I, being a designer in the field, I don't worry about the competition, not because I'm so brilliant, but you have to have some conviction how good you are, plus you have to know why or where you are good. And I can assure you the difference between a designer and a very good designer is in the way how he or she tackles the details. Because there's many people that come up with a nice sculptural shape and then they call it a day. But to really be diligent and apply it to every split line, to every perforation, to every button, to every surface texture, to anything that you do, the same diligence that you have in the development of a design concept, that makes you a better designer. And if you ask me, isn't that tedious? Yeah. You want an easy life? Don't become a designer, I can't tell you what would be an easy life, and it seems to get more difficult as we speak, but there's also pleasure in making something perfect. There's a pleasure in knowing that you have done something that's not only good in some areas, but it's the best overall. Now we come to 2 points that are the most subjective and the most personal ones, and they include my conviction. What could assist you in creating beauty? One is to try opposites, and the other one is an advice to consider minimalism. And I'm careful with my formulation. And I discussed with your professors that it would be worth a whole separate evening to just talk about minimalism. And interestingly enough, we have very opposite opinions on minimalism, so I'm very happy to discuss that. But for the moment, I'll continue here. What do I mean with try opposites? And there's a part of my lecture that's a little bit longer, and it shows you just pairs of adjectives that apply to a product, and they can both be beautiful. Now, don't take my examples as examples of beauty. They are not always. But they are examples of the opposite poles that you should see and look at and think of moving in between when you design something, when you develop something. We start with something very recent. So you have this design that does something that is familiar and something that is surprising. You know the beetle goes back to the original beetle, it's based on that, it looks similar, it's meant to look similar. So when people see that, they say, I remember my father, my grandfather, they had this kind of car. In your case, the great-grandfather. So a long time ago, people had the beetle. In the 1930s, they started the development. And we want to give people what they expect. We want that they see something familiar. And believe me, that's not the one ideal path to design. People tend to prefer the familiar. If you have a market research where you have 3 coffee machines from the competition and your new design, you'll be lucky when you get 40% acceptance. There's party time when that happens. It never happens. The percentage of people that will like your new coffee machine, no matter how pretty it is going to be smaller because people are used to the others. But yours, they've never seen before, and some look at it and say, what is that? And you hope they say a coffee machine, because you really try to communicate that. You did your job as a designer. People like the familiar. That's why Mini Cooper, Fiat Cinquecento, they did the same thing. They realized that, well, you know, we had some new designs and they were not so successful, maybe because they were just ugly, they lacked the beauty, maybe they were poorly planned, they were market researched to death and by asking the wrong people. But here, that's a safeguard. Some people were disappointed in Volkswagen that the new Beetle didn't sell as much as the old Beetle, which is very unfair because when the new Beetle came out, there were a handful of models on the market in the world. And this car was competing with hundreds and thousands of models from other manufacturers. And it was unfair to expect the same million-copy success. And there is the surprising, very surprising solution of the Cybertruck. Not only is it different than the, you know, Tesla has a horizontal continuity, the design of the Y model, the S model, the 3 model, the, what is it, A model? What's the next one coming out? No. That's the Y model. And then this, what, well, S, X, yeah. Well, anyway, there are lots of models, and they all look very similar, and they look very Tesla. They are very well placed. The design is great. I knew him when he was a student. And here, he does something completely different. Something that looks not only like not like a Tesla, but it doesn't look like another pickup truck. It doesn't look like the Dodge Ram or the Silverado or the Ford F-150 or 250, it just looks completely different. If anything, it resembles some wild study cars from Bertone in the 60s, 70s. That's a way to gain attention. That's also a way to stimulate senses. And again, I'm not saying this is beautiful, this is not beautiful. These are just two opposites. There's a general opportunity to do contrasting design or matching design. Some people say, well, you know, pepper and salt, I want to know that pepper is black and salt is white. Usually they take black pepper when they put it in there. And the shapes are similar, not identical, and the color is different. I could have found even some that are more different. So they're contrasting. And the other one is matching. They say, oh no, on my table I want it clean, I want it minimal, I want it German, as Professor Dave Teuner would perhaps say. And I don't mind if I have to look in how many holes are there to identify the salt with the 3 holes from the pepper with the 1 hole. I can design things that are singular. Although the handles are very similar or identical, they have different colors, but the fork and the spoon and the knife are very, very different in their design. Whereas here they try to make more of a similarity. The silhouette is very close, if not identical, and it's all meant to be one unit. So in general, you can pick your sides. There are these 2 possibilities. You can make it harmonious or dissonant. Now, I'm a person that likes harmony, but you know, harmony can be boring, I know that. And sometimes you want to be stimulated, and you're more stimulated perhaps by something dissonant. You're provoked, and maybe you'll memorize it more. And for a brand, that can be important. Just as an aside, this is on the left is a building in Basel train station from where people can look down on the tracks. There's only workers that work on the signaling. And these louvers that kind of bend up allow you to look through. It's from Herzog de Meuron, the people, the architects that did the bird's nest in Beijing for the Olympic Games. I don't know what's there on the right, but you can see that in general you have the ability to design something that is easier on the eye or more jarring. You can design in a disruptive way. There's a radio from Daniel Weil. He took all the components, put them in plastic bags so you can see the different components. He didn't put in the battery because I think he didn't want that lettering on the battery, Duracell or whatever, to distract from the design. On the right, you see Dieter Ram's work for Brown. A smooth shell, very simple. And those are 2 poles. Again, it's not that disruptive is not pretty and this is beautiful. That's not what I'm saying. I say there are so many attributes you can give to your design, and it's worth to see how big the world is in which you operate. Some design students tell me, well, I don't know, I don't have that many ideas, and is it really still possible? I mean, people work in design since a while. Well, let me assure you, the alphabet has 26 letters, and people write since hundreds and thousands of years. And still today, there are some writers using 26 letters and come up with a new text. Take that as an example. You have a lot more than 26 letters. You have colors, you have textures, you have shapes. You have the whole universe in front of you, and you can shape it. So that's not an excuse, okay? Your design can be intricate or can be simple. You know, both are Nike shoes, but the one on the left has overlaying textures and structures and shapes that are different. And on the right, not only is it one unified color, that already helps, but it's basically a fly, and it's a very simple one-piece, almost one-piece thing. Please focus only on the hubcaps, not on the cars. This is minimalist and ornate. You know, on the left, the rims are super simple. I bet they are just influenced by any technical requirement. And other than that, the designer tried to make it very, very smooth. And on the right, somebody thought it is a good idea to take the symbol of Paris, the fleur de lis, the lily flower, and arrange that in 5 times around in a circular motion and put that on a modern car wheel. And some people like that. Whenever something is on the market for a while, there's a good bet that there's a market for that. And I don't even want to say how big the market is. That's not the point. The point is that both is perceived as beautiful by specific people. You can do both. You have to know your people. There's organic and industrial. Perhaps not the best example on the left because it's not really so organic. It's fairly two-dimensional. It's probably a table. But I just wanted to focus on the pattern. You know, it's kind of this floral pattern on the right. It's not even a product. It is like when we talk product, it's, you know, just a material we can use. And it's a very industrial, repetitive, boring, simple approach. And sometimes you want this type of design, and sometimes you want that. There's another example for organic and industrial. And there's a little story behind. On the left, you see this, looks like a translucent material, a chair, fairly complex. And on the right, Dieter Rams for Witzow in the 60s, early 70s. I learned that this is a chair that is used in the Angela Merkel's German Chancellor office somewhere. And it tells me a little bit about the different approach that America has to history and Germany has to history for various reasons. I mean, in France, the presidential palace is very Louis something, you know, gold and modern art in there, thanks to our current president. But other than that, it's a very old setting, whereas the German Chancellor office is super modern and much more modern furniture than this from the 60s, 70s, but it also has this. That wouldn't look good next to the Resolute desk that's in the White House. So in the White House, there's, you Americans sometimes focus very much on history and sometimes you don't. I live in Corona del Mar. The moment somebody buys a piece of land that still has one of these nice one-story houses, it's a tear down, you know? And the developer and the construction people, they don't like to leave it as is. Where do we go there? We can't make money. We can't sell it for $5 million afterwards, you know? And that's somehow depressing when you come from Europe because you think, well, that's what makes Corona del Mar so nice, these old houses. And the new houses are gorgeous and they're beautiful and they have all the amenities, but they don't have that character, you know? So that's where you don't value, you American, I don't accuse you as a group here, it's just generalize, don't value history as much as we perhaps do in Switzerland or in Germany, where there's an old village and, oh, this house is from 1500 something, let's make sure we keep it. Is it comfortable? No. The ceiling may be low, the doors may be narrow, but this is precious. It's a part of what makes that village the village, you know. You've curved and angular, and I deliberately didn't put them in the chronological order, and I deliberately picked the same product, in principle, a mouse. You see on the right, I think there was probably an industrial designer involved, and he tried to do a good job. You know, slightly angled, maybe comfortable for the hand, but it primarily looks like done by an engineer, and it's kind of praying to the machine, as I would say. And on the left, people had a very different goal in mind when they designed it. I think it's probably one of the most perfect products that I possess. I wouldn't know how to change or to improve that. The materials chosen are just perfect. I mean, even the battery cover is made of aluminum, cast aluminum. I've never seen a cast aluminum battery lid for that type of, that price of product before. And it's just perfect, and it's curved, and I think they focused almost more on the identity of the Apple brand than they did on the human being. But I think they thought about the human being very soon, or probably thought, well, our target group of human beings would love that. And at least when it's about me, I agree, you know. Well, please don't focus on the colors, although they're worth looking at. But here you see the difference between clean and busy, and there are, of course, things that are a lot more busy. On the right, the very systematic pattern. It's like a Brown product from the 60s that Jonathan Ive did for Apple. And on the left, Yves Béard, one of my former students. My students are a lot more famous than I am. And you see that they try to change the pattern and also give a three-dimensional quality to a simple perforation, and they create an interest. So again, those are two possibilities. To be fair, this is not for the same type of product. The product on the left is more fun, you know, music, ta-da, and on the right, well, you can be a gamer, but you can also be a scientist using that. It's like one of these picture frames, like an iPhone. Anything can be shown on an iPhone. That's why the design is so simple. It's just a frame. And then there's voluptuous and lean. Interesting on the left, if some of you criticize that it's trying to, you know, go the sex sells way by using voluptuous female form, the designer claims that it's symbolizing how women are held back in society by this weight represented by the footstool. That sounds like an afterthought to me, if you ask me, but I think it's gorgeous, it's pretty, you know. On the right, it's very lean. I think it's a beautiful design too. Both have a different type of beauty. I'm not 100% happy with the seating curve on the seat on the right, but I think it looks very nice. I think it's called the shrimp. I'm not sure that's good naming. These are German designers. Sometimes they don't understand the quality of language. Yeah, I know what a shrimp is, but they don't know what shrimp connotates in English. You know. There's modest and there's ostentatious, and that doesn't judge the people wearing it. Maybe the person on the left says, you know, I'm so beautiful, I want to wear a gray suit and gray shoes, so nothing takes away from my face and people look at me. And maybe the person on the right is timid and says, you know, I don't want people to look at me, so that I'm wearing these golden shoes, so they take all the attention. So I'm not passing judgment again. It's just two opposites how you can go about in design. There's angular and curved. You can ask yourself, for whom is that chair? And if you say for a human being, I have a hard time assigning the one on the left to a human being. I'll be open, I don't like that chair particularly. But it's successful, it's easy to clean for outdoors. The person on the right was the first one doing a chair with just one leg and one piece, and worked a long time on that, and it's been done in several materials, so it's very interesting chair to study. You know how it's done in injection molded polyprop and glass fiber reinforced plastic, etc., etc. There's hard and soft. I mean, these pairs are not arranged in a specific way. I tried, could I do that, should I do that? I could even go and say, oh, I compared hard and soft, and then I compare hard and soft in a different way, like in a tactile way, which I'm doing with the next slide. And if you're looking at the dials on the left model, they're not even particularly hard. They have radii, they have surface curvature on the front, so they're kind of smooth, but the basic housing is very harsh, and the one on the right is super soft. Here's one that remote control on the left looks like the Apple mouse. It's perhaps done by the same guy, or at least in the same period. The same design, belief, and understanding behind. On the right, you see a textile cover and the soft shapes. There's utilitarian and decorative. By the way, I invite you to come up with your own pairs of adjectives. It's a very nice exercise to think what are pairs, and believe me, I had to ask my American girlfriend sometimes about the linguistic part, you know. What's the opposite of utilitarian? Is it decorative? Because even if you Google that, oh, they give you some kind of unexpected solution for your opposite, and sometimes it just doesn't apply to design products. So on the left you see obviously something that's either military device or Coast Guard or something like that. On the right something that's for entertainment, but both are radios. The one on the right is designed by Norman Bell Geddes, and it is called the Patriot because it's in the American flag's color and features the stripes and even stars on the knobs if you look closely, and is only being sold in those three colors. There's one version that is white and has blue dial and red inside, so opposite, but only those three colors. I like the product, it's very interesting. And the one on the left, that makes us ask, how important or unimportant is beauty in utilitarian products? There's a lot of money invested in design of investment goods, of products that are not consumer goods. And there's good reason for that, because there is a competition. Maybe that product doesn't have a competition. That's also possible. It's such a specialized thing that there's no competitor. I think there's a lot going on, and it looks very busy, and it doesn't look easy to clean, which is always an issue with anything that humans touch. So I think that would be a nice object to redesign. Curvaceous and straight. When you ask yourself, what should a faucet look like? I heard that one designer said, you know, I want, when I wash my hands or put water on my face, I want that it comes from an object that represents the liquid joy that water is for me. And I thought, that sounds really pertinent and sounds profound and good, right? But then if you look at it, when we have water in our apartment or in our houses, they come from a completely orthogonal system of tubes with a specific diameter. Why should at the end a little schlurfy thing there pretend that I'm now confronting nature? I don't. You know, it's one wonderful thing about civilization that we have running water in our houses. Should we make that look like it comes out of the jungle? Should we go for something that's more straight? Again, that's, you know, a choice to be made, and there's a market for both, and all faucets are successful independently from that. And you can even say that they're both very much alike, that they're very minimalist. So these are all opposites. The other, and I really encourage you to try thinking in opposites whenever you create something. It's a good path to beauty because you're trying to probe into two opposite directions. You're not trying to find this one way, you're finding your way between two poles. And as you've seen, those are 30 pairs. So those are 60 different poles that you're navigating in between. And there are a lot more. These are just some that I came up with when I was preparing my presentation here. But you can do a lot better. And this allows you to see how vast not only the field, but the universe is in which you operate when you are creating something. Some words about minimalism. I want you to be minimalist for several reasons. There is already one. If you start out as a young designer, designing something is difficult. Restricting yourself by doing something minimalist may make it easier in the beginning. Should not be an excuse. You should always aim higher than that. But that's only one reason. Also, to be a good minimalist, you have to worry so much about the details that in the end you're spending exactly the same amount of time as if you would design something incredibly ornate. So the real reasons, A, you should focus on your message. We designers, we are communicators. We always have to communicate something. It's a brand, a purpose, how to switch it on, how to open it up, how to replace the cartridge, whatever. You're communicating things. And try, like when you have a talk, like me tonight, to not talk about too many things at the same time. Try to communicate one thing and that one thing clearly. And that makes you already a minimalist right there. And the other thing is use as few parameters as possible. I'll talk about the parameters in a moment, but look at that switch there. Let's assume it's a light switch. When a lamp makes light, that's a noble purpose. It's something we need, it's something we use, it's important. And there's one switch, hopefully it switches on and off, and when you see it, and on top of that, if you see whether it's on and off, because if you're controlling it during daylight, and it's a light with a lampshade where you can't see properly, then it would be nice to see this lamp, is it on or is it off? That's why I hate many of these American lamps. You fumble with your fingers under the lampshade, then you find this little plasticky thing that doesn't go with a solid click into positions, but you basically turn it until it does something and you control. Oh, it has 2 steps on top, wonderful, nice additional function. I would love to see that. I would love to feel and see that, and I don't. So I'm frustrated with American lamps. Sorry, I'm not critical about your country in general. I'd love to be here. But a simple light switch can be very nice thing. I show you example about minimalist design from Dieter Rams. That is one of the early calculators. It's actually not the first one. The first one had LED display, you know, little light-emitting diodes, and but the design was exactly similar to this one. And the people did a good job. And if you want to compare it with one of the early Hewlett-Packard, you see why the one on the left is at least preferred by me. They're both, you can call them both minimalist. But I think normally people would say, oh, Dieter Rams is the minimalist, because here there's a little, you see, silverish line that's already scratched off. I think the designers did that to make it look a little bit valuable. And I think they failed because not only does it scratch off more easily, but people know that's not metal. It's just plastic with some print on it. And what do I need that for? The design of the buttons. What is a button? A button is basically an area surrounded by non-active area, and when you touch that, then it hopefully moves, you know, at least that's nice for tactile and maybe an acoustic feedback, and it switches something on or off. It performs its function. And so these people on the right thought, okay, we have an orthogonal grid underneath on our motherboard, and so we put them orthogonally. Also, it's easy to find them if they're all not just scattered around, but like the one on the left, also orthogonal grid. And the people on the right, they probably thought, okay, so it's logic, we also have a rectangular button, right? Is there anything wrong? And we give it a little radius to make it more friendly, right? And the size is probably defined by nothing else but the size of the switch underneath. They thought, okay, why make it bigger? Then it would just wobble and maybe malfunction. Smaller, that's going to be disagreeable for my finger when I touch it. So they didn't do a bad job. But the people on the left thought harder and better. They made these buttons that are slightly curved. So to operate the wrong button is not as easily possible because you're hitting the top of the button you want to hit. That's their theory. I'm just communicating that. I'm not sure that is really true. And they say, okay, for us, the human being is important, so the size of the fingerprint that you leave should be the size of our button to give us a good feedback. And I think they were more successful. They both have 4 colors, if you ignore the red and green button there. That used to be a sliding switch, also with a brown calculator. So they were similar. They both have relatively simple boxes. The minimalist German on the left is just a very simple box and corner radius. And then, because you usually put it somewhere in a pocket, the corner radius at the bottom, or you hold it in your hand, is bigger. So to make it more agreeable and more easy to store. So they thought harder. Again, this here has a little angle, to not forget the advantages. So when it's in front of you on the desk, it's slightly leaning towards you and makes it look more inviting. I'm trying hard to find a pro argument for the one on the right, you see. So I think the one on the left is more beautiful, and I think it's the more true minimalist. I'm not for intellectual minimalism. Invest the time, invest the effort. Don't be minimalist with that ever. But be minimalist with what means you use to express. And that's the parameters I was talking about. There are different parameters, and the reason why they're organized like that is very simply because usually when you start to work on a design project, you start to work from the top. The first thing to be decided is the size. Because once you are designing the graphics and everything is done, you cannot change the size easily. First you want to know the size, then the proportion, then the shape, the details, surface texture, color, and graphics. What has beauty to do with size? I read that when Jonathan Ive had, for one development of an iPhone, models made in steps of 1/8 of an inch, as you would say, or 2 millimeters. They all like this size, 2 millimeters bigger, 2 millimeters bigger. Just dead models. They didn't perform any function. There was nothing in there, no electronics. Just for the designers in his office to be able to touch them and say, I take that in my pocket for 24 hours and see how does it fit, can I easily get to it, how does it feel in the hand. And that has to do with beauty. Which size is beautiful? If you think sizes cannot be beautiful, I deliberately did not talk here about human beauty. But you know, some people say, oh, that person is too big for me as a partner, or too small for me as a partner. That's a personal decision, you know. I'm just saying that size has a beauty aspect to it, too. And Apple people understand that. It also has a functional side, of course. What fits in my pocket, very important for me, but also, what can I read without having to get my glasses out? So I want it very small in my pocket, very big when I look at it, okay? So that magic thing. Next thing is proportion. I've started to think, but I'm far from finished. Are there proportions that look more beautiful or more elegant? I mean, of course, when you have like a pen, you can't make it in cubic shape, although I'm sure somewhere on this planet somebody has once designed a cubic pen just for the fun of it. So they have a functional, those proportions have a functional aspect to them, but they also have a beauty aspect. I think my theory is that if all 3 dimensions are treated equally, like in a sphere or in a cube, then it's less elegant than the case where you have a flat object or an elongated object. It tends to look more elegant. That's very vague. That's all I can tell you about beauty now. Now, don't go and make nothing cubic or spherical anymore, because sometimes that's the best and the most appropriate shape. But it's worth thinking how proportion influences beauty. Shape, I could put millions of shapes here. I've just decided that one because, you know, A, it doesn't have a background. I like that about the picture, and I want to show you a pretty picture because this is about beauty. 2, I wanted to show an object that I think is well designed. You look at that, you know immediately what's the business end of it. Where does it cut? There's a little indentation for the finger, not exaggerated. You know that the finger goes there. It doesn't have to be bigger. You don't want your finger to be locked in there. Just, you know, show me where my finger goes. It just folds into that. And then the less important button on the front has the same color as the housing, or almost. And the orange one on the top shows when the blade goes out, you want to know what the status is. So this is really cool. But shape, that's a whole, I mean, you know, that's your problem in general. Which one of my shapes is pretty? I can't give you the answer just like that. First of all, I have to look at it, and secondly, you know, my opinion is different from Professor Wolfel's and from Professor Teubner's, and we can have a wonderful discussion, and then you come and your opinion hopefully is completely different. I always say 2 designers, 3 opinions, you know. Detail plays a very important role. I told you before that that's what sets the very good designer apart from the okay designer. Here, I just love how that's done. You know, there's this little indentation when you hit the button. I don't even know what that product is. I don't need to know. I just look at it and see the colors and the materials, the surfaces, and the details, how the cable comes out just at the end there. And I like that. I'm not even sure that's minimalist. Surface texture. I'm very happy to see that people give a lot more attention to surface texture these days. I mean, look at the perforation. There are all these holes are sunk into these little dimples, and then these holes are different sizes, so towards the outside they seem to vanish, they get smaller. That's just interesting, it's just nice, and you can bring a product to life when you give it some detailed attention of that quality. And this color, I mean, once you've designed everything, your color can mess it up. And here, again, I'm not judging this color, I'm just showing this as an example of color variation. Or you can enhance the quality, like with the previous product where you have this gold, which is not the same as the suede that you had on this project. Probably this one, probably a handle of sorts. I don't know. I don't need to know. But these colors, they harmonize with each other and give me at least a good impression. And you can screw something up with colors, you know, by really putting the focus on the wrong area. Or just finding colors that are not looking good together. Because you know there is no ugly color. You heard about this interaction of color, the famous book from the Bauhaus. It's all what color is about. How do colors interact? Any color is pretty, but you put two colors together that don't match, it can hurt at least my eye, and it should hurt yours too. And then there are graphics. Sorry, lousy example, not particularly nice graphics. It's just that graphics can also make something beautiful. They can detract from the message. They can, you know, just blur it. And they can give not only valuable information, but enhance the character of the product. And particularly in sports, it's very important. On skis, on snowboards, graphics, very important. So here again, just for you to really remember the parameters from size to graphics. And now, to finish up, that's the other part I promised to talk to you about. Aside from being creative, which all of you know you have to be, and all of you are, I have no doubt, you have to be selective. Because you don't, Mr. Teubner is not always going to be around. Leslie Wolfe is not only also enjoying his time at home in the evening, but he doesn't want to look over your shoulder the whole day, 24/7, you know? So you've got to be able to say yourself what is good and what is not. I understand if you're in the first, second, third term, this is difficult, but you have to know where this path goes, and it goes to autonomy. Autonomy, you decide what's good or bad of your own stuff, and that is not easy, and you have to train for that. And what I suggest as a training is the following. First, expose yourself to solutions, to artistic solutions. That means, hey, look at what your classmates are doing. Look at what else is done at this school. There's tremendous amount of design quality present here, on campus. Look at it. And look at magazines. I don't want to promote procrastination, but Janko Design, Design, Le Manouche, all these things, you should study that. That is time well invested. The problem is you shouldn't just eat potato chips and scroll through. You should think, how good is that? You should evaluate that. You should be judgmental about that, you know? Don't look at your neighbor's stuff and say, that looks like crap. That's not positive. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that you for yourself, you decide, why did I not do it like this? Or why would I perhaps like to also do it like this? You evaluate it, and then you analyze. You analyze why, what do you like about it and what do you not like about it. That's not easy to answer. You know, I'm always struggling with this, you know. There are some things like the Cybertruck. If you ask me, do you like the Cybertruck? It's like, that's another evening. Okay, that's a long discussion. We can have it in following this if you want. And the thing about the analysis is, I don't want you to do that too isolated. You should discuss it with others to find others' opinion, because you're not designing for yourself. You're designing for other people. Now, you're not designing for designers, so this is not the only group. You should discuss it at home with your partner, with your parents, with your friends. Show them what you do and ask them about their opinion and tell them why you did what you did. And don't think that that solves it and makes them love it. It just explains why you did it like that. Don't forget to listen what they have to say. Most important, at the end, always avoid frustration. Be inspired by that. I want you to adopt, and I want you to, you can not only adopt but adhere to other standards. You can see how other people are thinking and try to design it their way just once to see where that leads you. This inspiration part is very important. I believe that in culture, when today they say cultural appropriation is something negative, I'm not condoning blackfacing, believe me. But the problem of blackfacing is not a cultural appropriation, but pretending to be somebody else and denigrating and them, discriminating them and making fun of them. That is the problem. The history of culture is one of appropriation. How many people do you think invented the wheel? That was one person. And then the others appropriated that idea. And it goes on with all other kinds of styles and trends. And you shouldn't hesitate to do that and try that. If you think you were a peer of Pablo Picasso, if you are a painter, and then you see his painting, and if afterwards you paint the same as before, you're not paying attention. Now, you don't have to do crooked noses to be like him, but you have to think, why does this man do what he does, and how does that have an impact, or how could that have an impact on what I'm doing? That's what I want. Thank you very much. Now,
let's open it up for questions.
And I talked to Professor Teubner that if you don't have any questions, he's going to have one. They're going to be hard, so please have some questions.
Over here?
Yes, please. Oh, sorry.
What was your favorite client that you worked for or worked with? And why?
Well, there's of course Jura because of the money. Oh, thank you. I had a lot of fun in a startup that we had with luxury men's grooming. The reason is that I came up with a name. I designed the logo, the product, the packaging, the point of sales, the website, everything. That's very rewarding if you are, and very challenging, if you're responsible for an entire brand from scratch. And I've done that again with other brands, but they haven't taken off like that. I'm still, at the moment, in startup companies where I do that. That's very rewarding. But you know, Jura is not only paying very well, but it's very interesting because it's highest professionality. I mean, I've worked with big companies like Kodak and Samsung, and there's a different level of professionality, but when you work with startup, there's a different level of energy, you know. People are really like, oh, let's do that. If you go to Kodak, you go and your name is going to be put on a preferred supplier list so that your invoices get paid. Probably, I thought, there's little Wolfgang and the other steel and chemical companies that sell tons of material to them, and I just sell them a couple of ideas, you know. It's a funny feeling. Yet, they were very nice people, and there's a friend of mine working with them, so I felt good about that too. I'm very careful in general comparing clients. But what makes a client rewarding is his passion for what he does. In the case of Jura, those people are passionate about coffee. Interesting, I don't even drink coffee, you know. But you know, Karl Lagerfeld didn't wear skirts, and it was a very successful designer, and most of what he did was women's clothes. You are not designing for yourself, you know. It's too small a target group. And I enjoy, by the way, I enjoy the smell of coffee. I always think it tastes disappointingly, you know, a little bit bitter. But that's just me.
Thank you.
Welcome. Yes, please.
Has your concept of beauty changed over the years? And if so, how many times?
I'm not keeping score about the times. That's a bit difficult question because I don't say, okay, changed my concept of beauty today. But it has absolutely changed. I mean, honestly, as a student, I just wanted to be able to do design like Brown design. And then I did. And I thought, sounds arrogant maybe, maybe that's one of my character traits. Well, now I can do that, and now I want to go beyond, you know. And then when I joined Frog Design, they had a fairly distinctive style, and of course I tried to emulate that, not only because I was employed there, because I admired it. I thought it was nice that they had these generous curves and these sharp corners to make something look really smooth and precise at the same time. And now I'm more concerned what the respective client needs for his thing, which I think is professional. I personally admire people like Philip Stark or Karim Rashid, but the people that go to Philip Stark want a Philip Stark design, the people that go to Karim Rashid want a Karim Rashid design. They will be disappointed if it's not pink, you know? And I want to give my clients the product that they need to be most successful in the market that they are active in. And yeah, that's what I think is worth aspiring to. Now, that doesn't touch on the beauty. On the beauty, yeah, my perception of beauty has changed. It's probably gotten more refined over the years, at least I hope that. Thank you.